Professor Chilani, coming to you first, Dr. Jaishankar said that it's one thing that the team had put in a lot of hard work, and of course, India, ever since it had assumed the presidency of G20, was working very hard round the clock to ensure that there is consensus on critical issues that can be achieved when the New Delhi summit really happens. But the peculiar position of India in today's geopolitics makes it suitable to forge consensus because it is seen as a player which is acceptable by all the sides.
You're absolutely right, Anusha, and that was the key to the success of the New Delhi summit, the fact that India enjoys the status of a bridge builder. By breaking global divides, India helped forge a consensus because few had expected the summit to be a success, given the growing international divisiveness. The war in Ukraine has created deep divide between the West and the Sino-Russian combined. There's also a Western clash with the rising global South. So given the difficult geopolitical environment, few had expected the New Delhi summit to be a success, but it was a roaring success. And the success of the summit in turn has enhanced India's international profile. This was a high point in Indian diplomacy. And this has come at a time when China is grappling with multiple crises. So this certainly will be remembered as a great success that India managed to pull off.
Absolutely. Mr. Sajjanar, coming back to you and talking about the nuance, I believe, which dominated, especially if you look at that statement and the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the manner in which India was able to forge a consensus with all the key participants, with all the member countries, nuance and ensuring that a humanitarian approach was taken was the need of the hour. And even today, when Dr. Jaishankar spoke, whether it was on the issue of China, Russia, or even Canada, the minister was very categoric and at the same time nuanced that yes, these are important issues which are dividing the world right now, say the Russia-Ukraine war, but we need to be mindful as to how we can build those bridges together.
No, you're very right, Anusha, and I agree with what you have said, what the External Affairs Minister has said. I think India is possibly one of the very few, if not the only country, which straddles across, all these divides. Particularly the divide between East and West, Russia, China on one side, US, Europe, and some of the other countries on the other side. Because, it can talk, converse seriously and genuinely, authentically to Russia and also to the West. So I think the position of India and also the role, I would say, meaning the negotiators did do their job as they were required to do, but even the Prime Minister sort of, in so many of the issues, on Russia, Ukraine, you have mentioned, but his conversation, I'm sure, with President Putin just a few days before the summit, his conversation with Joe Biden on the evening prior to the summit, I think all those definitely would have gone in a significant way to contributing. And that's the reason, as you said, meaning India is able to bridge those divides. It is seen to be an honest broker, if I can use that expression. It's seen as a unifier. It's seen as a consensus builder. So I think all these elements worked in making this summit a success.
Professor Chilani, towards the end of the conversation in that interview, the learned minister talks about the fact that when the delegates, the lobby conversation, when they went back, the conversations were largely predominantly about, the UPI payments, which was a huge success. That counter there at the G20 summit was a huge success. Many people were very interested how India has been able to create the digital payment ecosystem, which has been a roaring success. And of course, Chandrayaan 3 was also majorly talked about, a story of change, a country with rich cultural heritage, with scientific temper, which wants to move forward, was the buzzing narrative. And in all these geopolitical events, of course, these declarations and joint statements are important, but the touch and feel or the kind of message a country is able to communicate is equally important.
You're absolutely right. India has a scientific and technological base, which it showcased recently by landing a spacecraft on the moon's south pole, becoming the first country to do so. India is also one of the world's most ethnically and culturally diverse nations. Its immense size, its immense diversity pose major challenges And yet, India has been a success story. Its democratic framework is a pillar of stability. It symbolizes unity in diversity.
Sure.
So while others can look at India and learn as to how India manages to succeed, India can also learn from others because it's
Yeah.
always a two-way street.
Yeah.
And just the way others who came to New Delhi for the summit, presidents, prime ministers, and monarchs, were curious about India's success story, India also ought to be curious about how others are prospering, how others are succeeding. Because only by being curious, by trying to learn from others, can we succeed further.
Mrs. Sajjanar, coming to you and talking to you, three countries have been dominating the narrative in many ways: Russia, China, and of course the bilateral with Canada and the kind of statements that had come out. I want to talk vis-a-vis China because there's this major infrastructure project, a corridor that has been announced. The response in the Chinese media shows that the government, the present communist regime in China, was not really happy with those kind of developments or the sort of narrative which is coming in. How do you think India was able to forge a consensus to get this together at the G20, considering the fact that the Western superpowers do want to tout it as an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative, but the minister concerned and the government officials repeatedly have said that, look, you have to look at it as an independent infrastructure project which is going to boost trade and economy across the regions. And yes, it might be an alternative to BRI, but it's not really some kind of an answer. That's the position India has taken so far.
Yeah, I think it's the right position, because let's put it this way. Comparisons are odious. And, any comparison of this is one project. BRI has been going on for the last 10 years. All of us know that, what are the problems with the BRI projects in a large number of places, whether it is debt, whether it is economic viability, it is, ecological sustainability, etc. No new jobs being created in the recipient countries, etc. There are a huge lot of problems. I think we should really be starting on a fresh slate, and I think this is a very ambitious project. The fact that it has been launched right now is doesn't mean that it has started functioning, started working.
Yeah.
I think it is still a challenge because how will the funding come? Where will it go? So I think all those challenges are there. So rather than sort of beating your chest and saying that we are here to sort of confrontation with the BRI.
Yeah.
I don't think that is the right way to go. Also, whatever might be the ultimate benefits or the fallouts from this, whether it's as far as the economic benefits are concerned, or even geostrategic, because I think that it has a very strong, powerful geostrategic message, which could possibly even more important than the economic aspect of it, because China's footprint has been increasing in West Asia, in the Middle East. Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia, $400 billion deal with Iran. So I think the fact that Europe, US, and India are getting together and coming to this region, I think it is a very powerful signal and a very powerful message that all countries need to take note of.